to call the April 22nd meeting of the Neshoba Regional School Committee to order. We are meeting remotely via Zoom technology, and Bolton Cable Access is live streaming this meeting via YouTube. So I would ask that we stand, or sit if you like, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the
to
flag
of the United
United
States
States
of America and to the republic
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty and
and
justice
for all.
for all. Thank you. Okay. We have one citizen's comment that I will read. It was delivered via email, and it is from Karen and Bert Gould of Lancaster. Good afternoon, Superintendent Clenchey. I hope that you and your loved ones are well. I wish to inquire how we can justify ending our school year 4 days early after missing more than 5 full weeks of the academic year, with virtually no remote learning whatsoever taking place during that entire period of time. I am totally baffled by the logic, or more accurately, the lack of any logic in this decision to end the school year early. Our kids deserve their education. It was totally beyond their control that they have been deprived of so much of their education this academic year. Given the results of your survey, logic would dictate that the parents in favor of working through the April vacation want as much effort as is reasonably possible invested in completing this academic year in a manner that attempts to make up for this interruption that we have unexpectedly had to endure. I suggest that the 85% of the respondents to your survey who wish to work through the April vacation feel similarly about utilizing to the fullest extent possible the 4 days you speak of utilizing to the end of the academic year early. Ending the school year early under these circumstances makes no sense whatsoever. With all due respect, it is the converse of this decision that is sensible, reasonable, and appropriate under these circumstances. We should be utilizing these additional 4 days in June to help compensate for the more than 5 weeks of totally lost education time before any organized effort at remote learning was implemented. I respectfully request that Neshoba Regional School District revisit this decision fullest benefit possible by continuing our students' education. By that date, we may have returned to our physical classrooms. In either event, we may be demonstrating that we are doing everything possible to conclude this academic year in a manner as reasonably close to what was intended and compensating to the fullest extent possible for what has been lost. I request that you distribute this letter to the members of the school committee on my behalf, and that was sent on April 14th. And the PS is, can you kindly advise how many of the 15% not in favor of working through the April vacation happen to be from 16% of the respondents that comprise faculty and staff? Your constituents would surely like to know that statistic and deserve to know. And the second email, I think, was from the next day. Good morning, Superintendent Clenchey. Thank you for your thoughtful, comprehensive reply. I'm sure you can see how ending the school year early under these circumstances has such a counterproductive, counterintuitive, and uncaring resonance to it. To me, it defies logic. How can we end a school year early when we haven't been in school for so much of the year? I'm sure many other parents in our regional district perceive it similarly. It feels to me as though the academic community is making a mockery of what has occurred by ending this particular school year early, and I know that it is truly not anyone's intention. Yet, that is the appearance of this plan of action and the manner in which it is being described. Even from a public relations perspective, it would make much more sense to take the position that the school year will end on the last available date in our calendar, such that your faculty and staff can make up as much academic ground as possible in a very unfortunate, challenging, and entirely unpredictable situation. I hope you and yours remain safe, strong, and healthy. P.S. While my wife and I have continued to work through this event, we have been impacted in ways that are very similar to everyone else. My CNM wife is working extra shifts to accommodate the continuing needs of mothers delivering their babies, and a staffing component that has been significantly reduced by both illness and economics. I continue to manage our now isolated working groups at Terminal A Delta at Boston Logan as flights continue to depart. I Zoom our Shabbat services from our synagogue in Clinton every Saturday morning to congregants who actively participate in these services from their homes. My mom, who turns 98 on April 20th, is a resident of the Life Care Nursing Home facility in Littleton. And like almost every other resident in that facility, has tested positive for COVID-19. She remains asymptomatic, thank the good Lord. We can only visit with her by walking around the outside of the facility to the closed window that looks into her room. We have 4 children at home these days. Our eldest is a sophomore at UVM, and the other 3 are students within the Neshoba Regional District. Sometimes I think we may overlook just how deleterious the impact of these events have been on our isolated children. We are all, as you pointed out, finding our paths through this difficult time and trying in every way to do our best. So those are the only citizens' comments I have. Moving on to new business. We have a DECA donation acceptance. Pat, do you need to speak to that, or do we just make the motion and go from there?
Can you unmute yourself?
Pat, I think you're mute. Pat, you're mute. Unmute.
You're still muted.
You gotta unmute.
Muting.
Alita, can you unmute her?
I'm all set. I'm just toggling between screens here,
I'm
sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a letter from the DECA program at the high school. The Neshoba DECA would like to request approval for donations recently made by local businesses to our chapter. The funds received from these businesses will be used to help elevate costs on trips next competitive school year. We recently received the following donation that we would like to present for approval. If you have any questions and concerns, proposed donations, please contact me. And it's signed Stavros Andropoulos. He's the advisor at the high school.
Okay, can we have a motion, please?
Sure. I move to accept the $1,000 donation from Avidia Bank to the NRHS DECA Club to be used to help alleviate costs on trips in the next competitive school year.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Okay, we're going to vote. It's a roll call vote. Leah?
You're muted, Leah.
Yes.
Kathy, yes. Steve?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Elaine?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
That's everybody, I think. Yep, okay, it's unanimous. Okay, the second item of business is the February Treasurer Report. Pat?
Does anybody have any questions about the reports as they stand? I think they're pretty routine at this point. We present them monthly.
Any questions for Pat? I don't see any, Pat. What about the December, I'm sorry,
We can move on to the next then.
December, January results of operations?
Yes, and as you can see, in December and January, this was long before we realized that we were going to be in the situation we are now. It looked like that we had a little bit of a surplus based on my estimates. It's mid-year, and things change throughout the year, as we know, and at this point, I would just like to ask you if you have any questions about anything that's here right now on these two reports.
Mike,
So Pat, this is not a question about this particular report, but in future reports, when we start to see numbers coming in for March, April, May, how different are these numbers going to look? Will they look as they typically looked in years past, or will they look somewhat different or drastically different?
My office and myself, we're working very hard right now to project out what we think is going to happen now that we have the information that we have, as far as the school not opening for the end, to be closed for the rest of the year. We're trying to work up some projections on our utilities. I can tell you right now, we're not filling our oil tanks anymore because there's enough probably to last us through the end of the year. So that being said, that's a significant savings for us. There are things that aren't taking place. There were programs that we had across the district. Things just won't take place that we've potentially contracted for. So I think we may see some surplus money here, which is a good thing for us. And I don't know what else to say except.
Pat, can I jump in on that?
Brooke, go ahead.
Thank you. I think that we also need to keep in mind that we also have different expenses
Right.
than we were ever
Oh,
anticipating.
yes, and I would mention that too, that we have a lot of unanticipated expenditures that we're going to have to take care of. And, going forward, that's still unknown as far as planning for next year, the startup of next year. So.
All right, Mike
Yeah.
and then Steve. I'm sorry, Pat, did you need to say more?
No, that's it.
Okay, Mike and then Steve.
Yeah, so thank you, Superintendent. You actually anticipated my next question. What are our unintended expenditures? If we kind of play this out and maybe at the end of all this, we end up with a surplus from a budgetary standpoint, where does that money go?
Well, we have to keep in mind that we borrowed from E&D and we need to put back into E&D as we do every single year. And our concern this year, and it makes me nervous when I look at this number, is this is nowhere near the number that we need to put back into E&D to be able to borrow next year. Remember the hamster wheel that we tried so hard to get off. And remember that, we're looking at borrowing heavily, so-called borrowing heavily from E&D next year. And the updates, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the budget concerns I have moving forward. That's not what this is right now, but that's a reality for us that we need to be thinking long and hard about right now.
Steve.
Okay, in addition, there will be some revenues that we will not derive. For example, the fees that parents pay for their kids to play certain sports. There is still the bus question, I guess. Number two,
Yeah.
and number three, I would, while I'm assuming we would be spending more money on IT and support for IT, like broadband and stuff like that, which will go up, other utilities in the schools will go down. So that we may find that that's a wash, but I'm concerned about certain programs that we're not running that we sometimes get income from.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to see that now.
Right.
That's absolutely correct. Any gate receipts, anything like that. You're absolutely right, Steve, that's not going to be available. And we're not going to see the same type of reimbursement next year, well, for the funding of next year than we had anticipated. And so that's also going to be, so right now I'm concerned about the size of this surplus right now.
Other questions for Pat or Brooke? All right, seeing none. I'm actually going to flip the next two agenda items. So why don't we do the remote learning update first? Todd?
Todd, you're muted.
Okay. So we continue to work within the remote learning module. I think everybody was obviously aware that the governor has obviously extended the closure through the end of the school year. So in the guidance from the state and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education was to continue within the remote learning plans and the guidance that was given out specifically after he extended the closure after the first 3 weeks post-enrichment. That remote learning continues to be the same. We are expected to get some more specific guidance by Friday from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and that guidance will be specifically to address specific what they are calling essential standards at each grade level that they will want teachers to make sure that they cover by year's end to ensure that students can then obviously move on in the fall. So we're expecting that guidance by Friday from the Department of Education and the commissioner. And that was really the big meat and potatoes from our call with the commissioner yesterday. I hope that everyone's had a chance to be on the remote learning site. The teaching and learning team, in conjunction with the principals, as well as the entire faculty, continue to work on that. Teachers are getting up their weekly plans either Sunday night or first thing Monday morning, so students can be working within their remote learning plan all week long. Our K through 2 students are working within the Seesaw platform, which continues to go exceedingly well. The parent feedback on the Seesaw platform is very positive. I actually just got off a meeting before I got on here tonight, and we want to make sure that we actually extend the Seesaw program even more with an enhanced version that we're going to be able to do, hopefully, for the rest of the year. Our 3 through 12 are working within the Google Classrooms. And that is tied to each of our school buildings. Each of our principals are sending out, gosh, I think we were speaking with Laura yesterday, and I think Laura Friend at Burbank had said they're going to get sick of me. I've sent out 3 to 4 communications already today. So they're continuing to work within their specific sites, and particularly of note this week, Teaching and Learning developed a social emotional site and a social emotional link that can be accessed on the remote learning site. What I did was I put a link on the front page of the website that says new social emotional resources available. And it's also located under the resources tab on our remote learning site. So what that does is provide a variety of resources for parents and students. It provides a variety of activities, it provides a variety of articles that tie to the social being for families during the time. Currently, now we're moving forward with continuing to develop a professional development resource site for our staff as we move forward with video conferencing and certain skills that some teachers want a little bit more support in. That's our latest work on the teaching and learning unit, and developing that for our teachers to provide them with professional development they would normally be having throughout the school year. And we're going to be able to be doing that remotely and getting our teachers involved in activities that support this kind of learning module.
Thank you.
And-
Brooke, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things to add though, but Leah, if you had a quick question, if you wanted to slip it in right now, if it's specific.
Leah.
Yes.
I was just wondering if you could elaborate on the video conferencing, if you got like what the plan is there, because I know it's kind of sporadic. As a teacher myself, I'm not using it. And so I just wonder, what is the expectation? What's going on there?
That's a great question, and we'll let Todd finish it up. But
Yeah.
It's
a great question. And from the beginning, obviously, when we first stepped into this, we were very careful and very cautious around video conferencing, knowing some of the safety, security, privacy issues that relate to video conferencing, and obviously teachers and students video conferencing, student to student video conferencing, some of the privacy and civil rights that tie into that. So we sought a tremendous amount of legal guidance around that. And, we were very sure that we made sure that any of the platforms that we're using, all of those companies such as Zoom, such as Google, et cetera, would be willing to sign our safety, security, and privacy regulations as we ask all of our digital vendors to do. And we weren't willing to go to video conferencing until we had that in place. We also weren't willing to do that until we had direct legal guidance from our, legal firms that we speak with. And when we finally got that, we felt very comfortable moving into the Google Meet video conferencing that our teachers are now using through the Google Classroom, and that now all of our teachers have the ability and access to use K through 12. So we just opened up Google Meet for our K through 2 teachers that had not been opened before. And like I said, with our professional development modules, we're providing that for teachers. So, we understand that some teachers might be a little bit slow or a little bit apprehensive because they haven't used it before with students or even obviously with colleagues. So our principals are kind of easing our faculty in with their Google Meet faculty meetings, and then really trying to encourage our teachers to use it. Understanding that some people may not feel comfortable using it and some people may not want to feel comfortable using it. However, what we have done is ask our principals across the district, for example, our social studies teachers have been working with Primary Source for the past couple of years. So all of our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies teachers are in lockstep with their curriculum because they've been working so closely together. So they're able to share those kinds of things or share those kinds of videos or lessons. And so that's kind of what we're promoting across the district with our principals, to make sure that all of our 3rd grade teachers in all 3 towns are working consistently so that we make sure that kids are receiving consistent teaching, learning opportunities. So, it certainly is a work in progress, but, I think what we've followed the appropriate avenues with video conferencing to make sure that it is being used appropriately and that everyone feels comfortable using it, and that teachers are available through video conferencing should students need help. We just sent out yesterday guidelines for video and guidance for video conferencing for all of our staff that our principals pushed out to all of their staffs today. And what we did was we provided guidance for what video conferencing can and should be used for. We also provided information on what it should not be used for. I can certainly get that guidance out to you folks as well. But we are certainly working to make that work and make sure that everyone feels supported and encouraged to use it.
Other questions for Todd or Brooke? Did you want to say something?
I've got a couple of things that kind of all tie in with
Right, just before you start, I'm sorry. Elaine, did you have your hand up?
Oh, and I was actually gonna make sure I'm not on mute here. I was gonna ask the same question that Leah asked, actually, about the video. Using it or have used it, so have not, because my personal experience is we haven't used it at all.
Yeah, so from what I understand, the high school is very, very, very comfortable using it. They've been working within the Google Classroom, and I think our middle schools, because those students are into one-to-one Chromebook, so there's been past practice of use with it in some format. Really understand that our elementary teachers and students, because we're not in a one-to-one, just have not used it. Those students don't access their Gmail accounts regularly for good reason, because they're so young. So that's just been a little bit of a learning curve. So we've gotten out instructions for Google Meet to our teachers, and we've also gotten instructions out for Google Meet to all of our parents. Any Google Meet invitations are going directly to the parent's email address, and the parent accepts that Google Meet. So, I think that's going to be a little slow to come as people get more and more comfortable with it. But I feel really good that we've done it in a very safe way, because I have seen multiple districts rush into it and it's been a nightmare. And honestly, my daughter's district included, and unfortunately, the other day, her class was Zoom bombed by inappropriateness, and the superintendent and the teacher and the principal were obviously dealing with that. So I feel very good that we've done it the way that we've done it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say the problem tends to be amplified the younger the student is, because those are the students that can't sometimes even read the instructions on the assignments. And so as a parent, it feels like I either need to become a teacher. I need coaching to become a teacher, or I need somebody else to be doing the instruction. But those are the kids that don't have the technology, that haven't used this before. The teachers haven't used it before. And they need the most instruction. So it just becomes like even more amplified, whereas the kids at the high school are probably the most capable of doing the work independently themselves.
Sure.
They're comfortable with the technology. We'll get there.
We will.
Okay,
Thanks.
Brooke, I think we're ready for you.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. So just a couple of quick thoughts that I want to put out there. And a lot of this goes back to the we were on yesterday. We were on a conference call with the commissioner for 2 meetings yesterday, actually. He reinforced again yesterday the notion of the potential for 1/12 budget to start the school year in July and August. And that will, of course, only happen if there aren't town meetings that approve the budget. Our budgets are all scheduled to go to town meetings on the 22nd. And if they don't, if they are, rescheduled to possibly sometime in September, which I think we all think certainly could happen, then we will start the year with a 1/12 budget. And that is literally a 1/12 based on this year's budget, not next year's, but 1/12 on this current year. So I've already brought this up with our union folks and explained to everybody that there'll be no raises, there'll be nothing that goes into play. Even our as we look to purchase our supplies and such, we're going to have to look a little bit differently at that. So now the 1/12 will basically go away as soon as the budgets are approved. And then, for example, our staff would then receive basically a one-time payout, or potentially that's what we would like to do anyway, and to kind of get them back on track and say September, October, late September, October, depending whenever the town meeting happens. And then everybody would fall into a regular school year thereafter. So a couple things to keep in mind. So that's one thing. Another thing is that the municipal budgets, our understanding is that our municipalities have been told that they may need to be going back and taking a look at their own budget that they're presenting. Our 3 towns and the school district, and I'm going to speak to this quickly in my superintendent's report tonight, basically have all agreed to go forward with the budget that you all have approved, because right now we don't have any other guidance than that. So it makes sense that we go forward with what we knew. With that being said, though, we've already been told that we may not get the same amount of circuit breaker that we are anticipating to get. The percentage may change. We heard from the DESE CFO yesterday that the state basically is going back and doing a lot of reviewing. We won't have a lot of details until sometime in the summer. So we just aren't going to know a whole lot. There's been certainly the discussion circulated that the towns may have to go back from budgets. If that's the case, that's going to be huge for us. I mean, absolutely huge. The other thing that the commissioner basically told us yesterday is that, and his staff said that we probably need to be creating a contingent budget now. We are having our next budget meeting on Friday, I think, Pat, is when we're having our next budget meeting. And so we'll begin that discussion to create a secondary contingent budget. Not expecting that to look very, very good, to be honest with you. And so I also spoke with Kevin Keaveney about that yesterday too, and said, I'm nervous about that, whatever the impact is going to be, that contingent budget. So just want you to have that on your radar. In terms of, if you were listening to the governor's update yesterday, the commissioner also spoke very briefly and certainly spoke a little bit at greater length with us in the morning with regards to what a return to school might look like, and some of the things that we should probably be prepared for of whatever this new normal is going to look like. I hesitate to put a lot out there right now because the truth is we don't know where this is truly going to land. However, I mean, things were talked about yesterday about, for example, transportation. If we are still in a position, and we could be, of the 6-foot distance, what does that look like for transportation purposes? What does it look like in a classroom? What other things do we need to be considerate of in terms of what our staff might need when we go back, and what might our students need when we go back? And maybe we look differently at our purchasing of materials this summer than we would normally look at. So we've had some of that preliminary discussion with Rob Frieswick, our director of facilities, to say, can you start looking now at some of these things so that we can potentially put some of this into play in the next month or two. So I would just want you to know that right now the discussion is that a return to normal may not look normal to us. So just as an FYI. One of the things that Todd spoke about was the social emotional link that they've pulled together, and hats off to our teaching and learning unit, our teaching staff, our administrators, everybody who's worked so hard on this. One of the concerns I have, and I've shared this in multiple staff meetings too, is the emotional piece for our students going back into whatever this new normal looks like. And I'm worried about this gap in time. Not necessarily from the academic perspective, although that's certainly at the forefront of our thinking. But I think the bigger piece right now for me that I'm concerned about is the emotional toll that this is taking on families, that this is taking on our kids, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's the impact of the pandemic on the homes. I think there are a lot of things that we need to be thinking about. And so I would want our school committee members to know that we have already started that discussion at the administrative level. So just as an FYI. Todd, I'm just wondering if you might speak for a minute about what we feel is strong engagement right now in the remote learning, because we had talked about that earlier today. Can you speak to that for a minute, please?
Sure. So we have the ability, obviously, with students who have our one-to-one with Chromebooks that are district issued, because our filters and everything travels with them home, we're able to track and identify, how many students are engaging on a daily basis. So our teaching and learning team can get on. We get on in the morning, 8 a.m. when students, can get on and see their lessons for the week and during the day, and track how many students are engaged within the Google Classroom or within Seesaw. So the one thing about that is, though, if they are using a home computer, such as a Mac or something else that's not district issued, we can't track that. So that's the one issue that we have if they're not using a district issued device. That being said, the average over the last 3 weeks, we've been averaging over 1,800 students out of a possible 2,400 that are fully engaged in the Google Classroom, in the remote learning site. And that's just obviously with district issued Chromebooks, and that's 6 through 12. So that's not tracking anyone who doesn't have a district issued Chromebook or is using a device at home that isn't district issued. So that's well over 70%, but we assume the engagement to be, close to 90%, if not more, because of each of their teachers, and their teachers certainly are reporting back and obviously on what students are or are not engaging. So we have implemented that in each of the buildings so that we can track what students are not engaging, and then there can be a counselor or a teacher or a principal reach out to that family.
Great, thank you. And so I think the only message I wanted to send to our school committee tonight and to our public is that we are monitoring that. And if we see some glitches in there or some students that aren't becoming engaged, we are doing follow-ups. We would want you to know that. The only other last thing for me right now is just that I would want you to know that I've been dropping in on staff meetings across the district, and I've hit, I think, just about every one of them. I think I might only have one grade group in one grade group and one school left to do. And as I said to them, and I would want to put this out publicly tonight, the simple words of thank you just aren't enough. I mean, they just aren't enough when we've watched what these people have done. And it's interesting as I read some of the emails that come into me from parents. You heard a bit of that tonight from the family that Kathy read their emails to. And incidentally, I did respond to both of their emails. People are dealing with so much, just so much. And that includes our staff, that includes our teachers. And, I can tease all I want and say, I'm watching you with one baby on the hip, or another toddler running around the room, or or a grandchild running through the house, or you're dealing with, in my case, a spouse at the other end of the house with all the devices that I need, but he has them. I would say in the 37 years of marriage, I don't think I've seen my spouse nearly like to the extent that I've seen him in the last couple of weeks. Normally, we're two ships that pass the night. I mean, I'm going off to school committee, he's going off to school committee, and you catch up at 11 o'clock and you say, oh, how was the day? And that's normally when our day starts. It's about 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night. And this is just such a different normal. It's an unexpected opportunity, I guess, for me personally, because it was something I just never thought about. But you think about everybody that's in these types of situations, and we can't forget that our staff are as well. Our administrators are, and our staff are, and yet they're coming through, they're stretching themselves. And especially as Todd was talking about, our elementary teachers that aren't used to teaching like this, they're not used to having all this space between themselves and the children. And this is so much to adjust to. And so I was saying that to them the other day, that at the end of one of our administrative meetings, I think it was either Thursday or Friday of last week, I would say I would go around the room, but we go around the screen now. We don't go around the room, we go around the screen. And I said to them, as we wrapped up our admin meeting, I said, if there was like a word right now that you could put out there that you think this is what I'm feeling right at this moment in time, what would that look like? And of course, you get the normal ones, right? Like, I feel nervous, or I'm really anxious. So you get that. But the word that kept coming up over and over and over again was pride. I feel so much pride in our staff. I feel so proud of the efforts that I'm seeing them put in to connect with our children. I'm proud of how they're thinking about this. I'm proud that they're working collaboratively. And you heard Todd, and I think that's such a good example, Todd, of the middle school social studies teachers working across the district. We see a lot of that right now. Everybody trying to work across the district so that we're well calibrated. I did the same kind of thing with the high school when I talked to the high school department chairs, and a word that came up there was resilient. We are resilient. Mary Murata took all of the words and put them into a nice word play of our Neshoba symbol. So cool. And I said to her, what we should do is we should really continue to add and evolve with a symbol. And then I said, then I think we'll blow it up and put it in the school committee room. We'll get it framed and put it in the school committee room, because it really does represent a moment in time. And some of their words were, there are opportunities here, that it's exciting to kind of be challenged like this. But then there's boy, it's exhausting. It's just exhausting, So to all of our staff out there, we can't say thank you enough, because you have been resilient, you have been overwhelmed, you have stretched, and by golly, you've just. So that's it for me for the remote learning, the add-on to Todd. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions on that.
Let's see, any other questions? Leah?
So with all of the teachers who I'm interfacing with my 4 kids, it's going really amazingly. And Mrs. Camp, little shout out, Hale math teacher, she did a little survey of my son today just to ask him, how did that video do? Like, how did it help you? How are you feeling? Right? It was just like this very quick dipstick moment. And it made me pause and say, that should be happening very regularly. So can we, or have you guys considered how you might try to get that feedback, that two-way communication going around, how is this going for everybody? Are the students, I know that the teachers have to respond to assignments and stuff like that, but can we do some sort of another survey or go around of how this is doing?
Todd, do you want to speak to that, or would you like me to speak to it?
Sure, we both can. We were just you and I were just chatting about this earlier. Laura, a friend at Burbank, did send out a survey just with that, asking for feedback on remote learning. So that certainly is something we're putting forth with each of our principals to, now that we're fully embedded in this, so that we can solicit feedback from families and students as it relates to how things are going,
And teachers.
and
And
teachers.
Leah?
So I think that my other set of questions that I won't even go into much because I'm sure that you're still trying to get your head around it is how are we managing the 3 transition years in our district? And in particular, I think that you said that Mr. Cullinane is forming a committee for the seniors to try to get his hands around all of that which needs to be dealt with, both formally and informally. But are you also pushing that down to the 5th grade and the 8th grade?
I can speak to that, and then Todd, if you feel free if you've got anything to add. I think our process probably, because our staff is seasoned at doing this, I'm not as concerned about this because I think that we can still take our regular process. What's going to be missing, of course, is like the step up days, right? When the kids can actually go to the new building and that kind of thing, because that just can't happen right now. But the actual process itself with the teachers, I anticipate that should be relatively smooth. I'm not concerned about that. You bring up a good point, though, if I can just speak to the seniors, and this is also in my superintendent's report, but I'll just bring it up now. You know, I think I'm just speaking for myself. You know, I think that Todd and I certainly knew what was coming yesterday afternoon when the governor spoke, but even though you knew a little bit in advance, I guess 2 things for me, and again, I would just speak for myself. The first thing is I felt a sense of relief because I was incredibly concerned. As Todd knows, I was really feeling anxious on Friday. I think that would be the best term that I can use. I was worried that we were going to be pushed back before I felt personally it felt safe to be pushed back into the schools. And I just couldn't imagine what that was going to look like. And I guess as a superintendent, I was thinking, do I feel comfortable with this? Can I even possibly support this philosophically right now? So to say what he did, I felt a tremendous amount of relief because I thought, at least from our lens, our staff and our students are safe. You know, so there was a relief. The second emotion I had, though, right after he was done, as I sat down, I thought there was just a profound sense of sadness, and I guess it was for all students because you look at this and you say, all the field trips, all the fun things that the students do in those last couple of weeks of school, like all of that has evaporated. But there is no greater sense of sadness, I feel, than for our grade 12s. And, you know, I did say to both Steve Cullinane and to Todd when we were talking about it last week, we have been told, and this is not a negative, and I don't want it to be sounding like a negative, but we've been told pretty frequently that next week you'll get guidance for your grade 12s. Next week you'll get guidance for your grade 12s. And again, yesterday, next week you'll get guidance for your grade 12s. And I'm not being negative because I think the DESE has so much that they're trying to get their own heads wrapped around because this is just so big. And maybe grade 12s don't rise to the level of pride for them. And, you know, so I know I'd mentioned last time that I'd been in touch with the president of our grade 12 class. And so I said to both Steve and Todd, irregardless of whatever advisement is coming, I don't want to wait anymore. We need to be planning something now. We need to be having these discussions right now. So I reached out to Steve Cullinane, and he absolutely has gathered a group together. Actually, they met today. We're going to be doing a debrief tomorrow of what that meeting looked like. I reached out to the president of our grade 12 class and said the same kind of thing. You know, even though we're still expecting guidance and maybe we'll have to change something, but we can be flexible, but we need to start to plan something right now. So whatever that looks like. So I guess what I'm saying is at the end, I'm not as worried about our students that are still within our system. My greater concern is the grade 12s right now as they leave us. And I think I said this last time, one of the reasons I'm not as concerned about our K-11s, and I said this to our staffs, is because I know our staffs well enough. They're bright, they will figure this out, and they will take those kids from where they're at and take them to that next level. So I'm not as concerned about that because I know our staff will do that. So I'm not as concerned with the transition process either. Really long answer for a short question. Sorry, Leah.
Thanks, Brooke. Elliot, Mike.
this is for the superintendent. I realize that as the more conversations we have, the bigger the ripple effect that we begin to realize that this has on it really just touches everything. I want to speak a little bit to the educator's lens. I wonder if there has been any consideration for professional development in the fall, especially considering that there is the very real possibility that this next wave comes, and how our teachers at our different buildings plan to sync up so that this transition from a classroom teaching model to a remote teaching model goes a little bit smoother the next time around. Not that that is any sort of a commentary on how this has gone, because
No, I know.
that's not it at all. But I think when we do anything a second time around, it gets that much easier. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to that.
Sure, I think both Todd and I can speak to that. So I would agree with you. It's not a commentary. I understand that, but there's also a potential reality in front of us. And I too am concerned about that. Not wishing it upon any of us, but I mean, it's a potential reality. I think too, when, I know that when we talk later about policies and protocols, I'll talk about lessons learned. I mean, that's how we deal with our administrative team. We have what we call times when we do lessons learned. What are things that we've learned from in the last maybe 2 weeks or since our last meeting or what have you? And I think this is one of those moments that we need to learn some lessons from this. I also think that you'll see Todd and Teaching and Learning probably do some redesign in terms of their PD for next year in light of this experience. So I think that, probably now is not a good time to do that assessment, because I think we're still too early in the game. I think that we'll find that by the year's end, I think you're going to find a lot of our teachers are feeling infinitely more comfortable, particularly at the elementary level. Todd, if memory serves me right, though, we did do PD in the first couple of days leading up to the remote learning time. So I would want you to know that we did do some Google training, but not nearly to the extent that I think we can. But we did do some initially right out of the gate to help people feel a little bit more comfortable moving towards remote learning as a practice for us.
Elaine, did you have your hand up?
Yes. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this question right now, but it's something I want to keep a close eye on. You mentioned, and I think we all realize, that flexibility is going to be key moving forward, particularly when it comes to the fall and what that looks like. Do you expect that we as a district will be given the flexibility to do what is right for us versus being handed directives down from DESE or from the state and having like a tension there? There was some tensions when we closed the schools originally. And I'm wondering if you've seen that evolve or if you think that will continue moving forward.
So that's a great question. Refer back to my comments about my Friday sense of anxiety here.
Sydney.
I think that was my biggest concern on Friday. And the reason why I was worried on Friday was because the governor had made comments earlier. And again, I'm not saying anything that is not out there in the public domain. And one of the comments that was alluded to, in his comments, something that was alluded to, was the fact that superintendents would like to get kids back into the classroom so that we could test them to see where their learning gaps are. I can assure you that from my lens, and I know Todd and I have talked about this before, I mean, he has connections kind of on the North Shore. My connections tend to be from Middlesex County, which kind of almost abuts, probably even does maybe about North Shore, and kind of goes west through Worcester County and westerly that way. And, I've been involved in a lot of Zoom meetings with superintendents, and that thinking has never, ever come up in any of those meetings with a lot of superintendents. And so it struck me as odd, which is why I felt that anxiety that, oh my gosh, is he going to feel forced, the governor going to feel forced to move us into something? And then where my headspace was going on Friday night is, am I prepared to say, no, we're not going to? So there's a heavy weight there Friday night for me as I was weighing, my own philosophy on whether this felt safe or not. And not that I'm not a doctor. I don't know it. But when we're still going into grocery stores where people are masked and gloved and behind plexiglass, and you can only walk one way, and I thought, what does this look like? Like, what is that cafeteria going to look like? How many lunches are we going to have to keep the 6 foot? Just the practicality of it didn't make any sense to me. So I was worried that I wasn't sure if we were gonna actually have some local autonomy or not. But one of the things I would say is it seems to me that every time, and again, this is not being negative, but every time that we're told, well, you'll probably get some direction on that next week, and we don't, very often what we do see is the decision comes down as local. And then Todd and I are frustrated, and we say, well, we could have made that decision like 2 or 3 weeks ago, So I don't know right now whether we're going to have local autonomy if we open again in September. I say if. I would like to hope we all want to go back to something that resembles normal. I mean, we just do. This is so hard on everybody, kids, us, everybody. I just don't think that the normal that we heard about yesterday is anywhere near the normal that we're used to. And that concerns me. So I really don't know. And I don't think, Elaine, right now that they know. They're trying to work it out too.
Thanks, Brooke. Any other questions for Brooke? Okay, thank you. And I want to thank you and your team, Brooke, for the work that you have been doing. I always have said that our staff is the greatest strength that this district has, and the dedication of the teachers is boundless, and their care for the students. But it takes a very strong leadership team to keep everything coordinated and working, and to be receptive to their needs. And so my hat's off to all of you for the work that you've been doing. And I'm not going to lie, I've said on more than one occasion, boy, I'm glad I'm retired now. I just can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. So thank you for all the work.
Thank you. I think that Todd in teaching and learning, Todd and I both work in kind of different lines of our administration. And I think that the academic component that Todd and his team have been working on has been just wonderful to watch, and flourish. It's been amazing.
Okay. Thank you. What I'd like to do now is to go to the item on the Student Opportunity Act. You may recall that at the last meeting, I asked folks to take a look. Elaine, could you read the motion?
Sure. I move to approve the Neshoba Regional School District Student Opportunity Plan for the years 2021 to 2023.
Can I have a second? Anyone? Mary, thank you. Questions, comments for Brooke and Todd? Stephen.
Okay, I read through this. I looked at the commitments that we have to make in our budgets, and I think we're premature to sign this now. It's asking for some, a lot of money to be committed to this program, and we just don't know what's going to happen. And I think to sign this now, to agree with this now and sign it now, which we have to, I guess we have to do, because there's places on the back where it can be voted and signed and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's premature.
I think that Todd had responded to this last time, and Todd, I'm going to ask you to respond to it again, because I think you may have forgotten that these are not for us really new funds. Todd, maybe I'll let you explain this, because the truth is this is what was happening already anyway. So there's nothing really new in here. And I would also point out that one of the things, like we would like to have it voted on tonight so that it's just in our back pocket. But this is one of the things that has come up as, you know what, we may end up having to sit this on the back burner anyway from the state level. But nonetheless, we want to have it ready so that when they're ready to push go, you know. But Todd, why don't you speak to it? I'm sure that you can respond much more eloquently.
Sure. So this is legislation that was passed in November. And so all that school districts are being asked to do right now is to show how you are addressing meeting the needs of students in underrepresented populations. Any financial numbers that you are seeing in there right now are already monies that have been approved and budgeted for in past school year budgets. So it's not saying that we're pushing, that this is all it is a report to the state saying, these are the monies that have been allocated for, or the monies that we get from grants to support these kinds of programs. It's not asking us to commit to future monies. It's just a short report on what we are currently doing for those underrepresented and those smaller populations.
Steve? You were shaking your head.
I'm listening to what he's saying and I'm shaking my head. That's,
Yeah.
I can do that.
We're
No, you can do it.
we're
This
mandated.
But
So we're
this is a plan for 2021 to 2023.
Mhm.
Okay, even if it was in this year's budget, okay, we don't know what next year's budget is going to look like at all. And I think we're pushing. I think it seems to me we're pushing this to make somebody at DESE happy, and we just don't have I don't think we have the money allocated in the budget going forward. We may have it allocated, we may have it approved in our budget for next year, but we don't know what that budget's going to look like. And if we have to go to a 1/12, the monies aren't going to be there.
Can I see if I understand it? Let me state it another way, perhaps. So the Student Opportunity Act, this is a requirement, much in the same way that we provide ELL instruction. That's a commitment, and we bake that in. Special education is a commitment that's baked in. Responding to how we're going to meet the needs of our underserved populations, which I think was the focus of our MCAS analysis this year. So it's great that 90% of our kids are advanced and proficient. We pat ourselves on the back, and that's great. But the real challenge for us is how we respond to the needs of that 10% that isn't advanced and proficient. So we've been saying that for years. If that's our goal, that's our goal. So finally, the state says the same thing. What are you folks doing for your underserved population? So it is something that it's been a goal of ours, essentially codified by the. If we got into a situation, and I hypothetically, where we had to make some cuts because of what's at stake, it's not from those areas. And so when we see money allocated for staffing, that's staff we already have. They're already getting paid. So it's a commitment to the actions on behalf of these students. That's how I see it. And when you look at how these students are being serviced, and you parse out the costs, they're things that are in our budget anyway. Is that an apt understanding?
Yes.
Todd?
Yeah.
It is. It's, again, this is just a requirement to show the state what we are currently doing. So much of that funding that you see in that comes from Title I, II, III, IV funds that that we get from the state. So again, this will determine what kind of reimbursement we continue to get from the state based on showing and proving that we are meeting the needs of those learners in our district. And to do that, obviously, we hire special educators, we hire ELL teachers. We have to show that we provide and buy resources, content resources that address those needs of our underrepresented populations. We are a district that is, actually, this is what's called the short form. We have to turn this in as a short form because we're not a district that has high incidences of these kinds of groups. Obviously, other urban districts in the Commonwealth will be filling out a much larger, a more comprehensive plan, but we do have to show, and that's why this plan, you know, it says FY 21 to 23 is just what is our plan moving forward to show the state that we are actually doing things to close those achievement gaps for those students. Those monies that you do see, the majority of those monies are coming from state aid that we get because we're demonstrating that we are doing that with the programs that are in place.
I think an easier way to
Where,
Wait, Brooke and then Steve. Go ahead, Brooke.
I think an easier way to look at it is, you know, we get targeted funds, and this is basically showing that we're spending the money exactly where the government has asked us to spend it.
Right.
That's a super simple way of saying.
That's a good way to say it.
Just verifying to the state, we're doing exactly what you told us to do. This is not money that's like general allocation that we can use for just anything. This has to be specifically used for exactly what's in there, and we have to do that or we're not going to get the money. So we have to show that we're spending it exactly as we're supposed to spend it.
Okay, Steve?
it's $1 million, and it says budgeted fiscal year 21, which is coming up, and we don't know if we're going to get any of that title money, do we?
Entitlement money. We're entitled to it. We don't have to do anything to get it because of the nature of the students it addresses, Steve. That's how I can explain it. That's my understanding of it.
I believe the DOE, the Federal Department of Education, recently said that they're going to give all kinds of waivers and exemptions to provide this stuff. And if they're going to do that, then they're looking at not providing any of that money.
They haven't done it yet.
Well, they've talked about it. It was on the news in the last couple of weeks.
Excuse me, Brett.
Yeah. So are these monies that are listed here, are they a commitment? Are we committed to spending these monies?
That's just showing what we have spent in the current past year. But the majority of those monies were monies that are grant funded through Title 1, 2, and 4 from the state. We have to show that those monies that we've gotten from the state, we've put into these programs for these underrepresented categories of students. So you'll see there are 9 special educators on there that are funded through those grants. And so we have to show that's the money that we've received and that's where it's going. It's not a commitment moving forward because that money is coming in from state aid.
It says fiscal year budget item.
Wait, Steve, wait. Brett, were you finished? Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I just want to follow up. So if our budget does get slashed going forward, what happens to the numbers that are listed here?
I'm not sure that, I think it's really the bigger question. If these monies, for example, the entitlement monies are slashed, then the whole state is going to have to go back and review all of this. It won't just be Neshoba Regional School District. It'll be all of us because all of us are having to do this. Like the entire state, it's not specific to Neshoba. But this is, to be clear, this is not monies that are coming through like our taxpayers or that's not what this money is. This is grant money for specific purposes. And we're just showing that, yes, we've put that money exactly where you told us to. That's all it is.
Steve?
I've said my piece.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Todd or Brooke relative to the Student Opportunity Act? Seeing none? Oh, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, sorry. So I'm just looking at the details of the SOP. Can you speak a little bit to the evidence-based programs and the programs themselves? When we say that they're evidence-based, does that mean that the programs themselves are based on evidence, or the programs are utilizing evidence to drive the curriculum? I guess I'm not really sure what that means, evidence-based programs to close gaps.
So we have to show, for example, if you take a look at number 3, inclusion or co-teaching for students with disabilities, and beginning in 2017 and 18 school year, we moved forward with our co-teaching program in mathematics. And if you'll recall, this year, in the past couple of years, we've shown that there's been a growth in our MCAS results and even our local assessments, that those students in those groups have shown targeted growth as a result of our co-teaching and inclusion programs. So when we show that as evidence, and we put that in Title I, Title II, Title IV funding, we show that is a program that is an evidence-based program that has helped students, particularly in those underrepresented groups, grow and show achievement. That's one example. So that's how we get funding for those kinds of programs. So that co-teaching program started in 2017. We continue it, but that's been one example. Another example was, I think you saw on there, and this was a question from the last time somebody asked about the $100 that students at the high school are spending to take that college level course. For example, to take that college level course, that's thousands of dollars, but we get grant funded money so that we can send those kids to take that course. And all they have to do is show, you pay $100. And even in those cases, sometimes that $100 is covered so that they can take that course, pass that course successfully, do well in that course. It's considered somewhat dual enrollment, and that's an evidence-based program that is meeting the needs of those students in that capacity.
Other questions? Joseph?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I wasn't really going to ask anything about this, but the discussion has sort of piqued my curiosity about this. And I thought I understood it, so let me just confirm that I understand this. This is a legislative mandate. And if I understand correctly, then if it's a legislative mandate, then the burden falls on the legislature to fund this program, does it not? Am I missing something here? Because if we adopt this, we're just saying, look, we're willing to do what the mandate states. Now the burden is on the general court. Give us the money to do this. Is that what we're doing here? That was my initial understanding, but now I'm a little bit confused.
That's exactly right.
Mary?
So Title I and the other entitlement grants are actually federal funding.
That's right.
So in effect, what Massachusetts does is it applies to the federal government for these entitlements, and it gets funneled from the federal government to Massachusetts. So part of this is that Massachusetts needs to justify to the federal government that these entitlements, and they are entitlements, and we don't get very much federal money of any sort. But again, it's coming through Massachusetts. So that for Massachusetts, the more districts that will do due diligence to have looked at what we're already doing and how it fits into this. And so we have that done, give it back to Massachusetts, and then they have more data to be able to feed back to the federal to say, see, we are targeting the students, and we do have a certain percentage of our students who are underrepresented and underperforming. And we really want them to be able to achieve the way so many of our other students in our district do. And so that's really what this is about. And so I would recommend that we go ahead, because as Brooke said too, if everything falls apart, then it's going to be everything across Massachusetts and districts with far more students who fall into the category than we have here in Neshoba. So the work has been done. It's documented. We also have even other grants, it seems, that are being referenced, as well as the entitlement grants. And I think we could just take this off our plate. Not that I don't understand what Steve is talking about and all of our trepidation looking forward to what is going to be our budget. But I just see that this all resonates with work that we've heard before that's going on. Let's just pass it and get this off our administration's plate.
Mary, thank you so much for so eloquently pointing out the federal component, because you're absolutely right. Everything you said is absolutely spot on. Thank you for adding that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, I'm going to call the vote. We had a second. Wait, Elaine, did we have the motion? We did, and a second. All right. Leah?
Yes.
Kathy, yes. Steve?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Elaine?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, so we are now at the part of the agenda, old business B, policy and professional development update. And I sent everyone a document this afternoon, and Alita, you can add it to the meeting materials. So this is relative to the recommendations and some recommendations that Tim Norris made to us relative to our certain policies and also professional development. So I took what was in the report and I took the things, there was a whole section of the report about the policies that he looked at. So he didn't name them by our policy code, so I did that. I took the titles of the ones he mentioned, attached the policy codes to them, and then noted the basis for review, and I took that information right from the report. In the status column, I went through every single policy because we just completed a policy review, and there was a point right at the end of reviewing all the policies where I recall saying that we're turning these over to MASC so they can put them into their database for us, so they're accessible in a very convenient way on their website and ultimately on our website, and that certain things would need to be revisited. I'll take the first one, ACAB and ACA, which has to do with harassment and sexual harassment. And at one of the last, maybe it was the January policy meeting, I recall Lee and I met with Anne Marie because we had some input from a group of teachers at the high school with suggestions about the sexual harassment policy and harassment policy. So that was slated to be re-examined, and it just is timely that it is something that we review. The other ones you can see in the status column. I'm not going to go through every one, but I indicate when it was last reviewed. Like I said, all of the policies and given over to MASC. The one area that I think we need, sticking with policies, is in the area of protocol. There was one policy that referenced a protocol, IJNDD, the online communication policy. And we had begun the process, or MASC had recommended that we take protocols out of the policy manual. Well, then we discovered, relative to overnight field trip policy, that we really needed that protocol somewhere where we could see it in order to make decisions. So that was another topic for discussion, not related to the executive summary or anything. So that is some work that still needs to be done with regard to looking at these things, seeing what's protocol, identifying them in a way, making them available as a reference to the school community, to the school committee, and to teachers. So on the second page, there are additional documents outside of our policies where there was some basis for us to conduct a review, and there were two relative to that are in the student handbook: the grievance procedures for filing, processing, and resolving alleged discrimination. That's on page 7 of the student handbook, and bullying and harassment, which is on page 59. And then the MOU, which is the Memorandum of Understanding between the school district and the Bolton Police Department. In the notes and recommendations, these are the things that were recommended to us. This is something that we asked for in addition to the findings. So our next steps with regard to this information is to do a policy review, and also to, if there are protocols, to identify them and to make them available as a reference. If there are none, then to have them developed, but also to review the policies that exist. So I put this together for ease of reference after we accepted the report, and our next steps would be to work on these things. And then the professional development aspect of this would be the training for administrators with regard to conducting investigations, documenting, and reporting. So this is something typically that the policy subcommittee would take the lead on. Leah and I are the policy subcommittee. Leah, you have your hands full with the teaching and with your kids at home and everything. What I would like to be able to do, just preliminarily, if that's even a word, is with Brooke's okay to begin to go through this with Anne Marie and unpack it a little more. Look for any protocols that we need to re-examine, and then get at the recommendations that are at the end. Brooke and I both have had conversations with Mike Macaro relative to training for administrators, and that is something that can be developed for the start of the new school year, maybe at the end of the summer, maybe right at the beginning. But that is something that is very doable for us. So I don't know. Just in terms of this, I'm happy to proceed with Anne Marie if that's okay with Brooke and Anne Marie. So just any questions relative to this, and then I have something else. Yes, Mike.
Mike, you need to unmute yourself, please.
Oh.
There we go.
This is more of a comment, and I'm wondering if you could speak to this. There's a fundamental difference in policy and procedure. By its nature, is overarching, broad, and able to be interpreted with finer procedures, particularly at a building level. Can you maybe speak more to that, just so that those that aren't quite as comfortable with the difference between policy and procedure know that? I think that if someone were to look at this document to the untrained eye, this might seem very vague, but I think, again, by its nature, it ought to be vague so that it can be interpreted through procedure. And I'm just wondering if you think you can do that.
Yeah. Oh, I know I can do it, Mike. This is basically, I use the word unpack a lot. And so what I did was, instead of just highlighting the report, I went through the report and picked out the things and organized it in this way so that we could see the work that we have to do. So in the report, under the title column, this is what is in the title column. We just finished a policy review, and so it was important for us to know which policies. We identify our policies with this code that is pretty standard and throughout schools for identifying policy. So yeah, policy is an overarching set of rules, if you will, and then the protocol, the procedures, is how those get actualized. What are the steps one follows in implementing the policy? So the school committee is responsible for establishing the policies, and then it is typically left to administration to develop the protocols. Now, there has to be some sort of an interface between the policy and the protocol, and some oversight to make sure that they're related and they make sense. So Mike, you spoke about at the building level. For certain policies, the procedures, the protocols that would make sense at the high school may be very different than those at the elementary level. So that's where we have to turn our eye right now. The protocol column is pretty much empty. There may be protocols. We need to look at them and make sure that they do what they're intended to do. And that work involves working with administration, the district level, and also at the building level. And then the other piece of this that we need to examine is how this works through the legal lens. So our attorney would be looking at these as well. Does that answer your question, Mike, or not?
It does, and just to be clear, it is not within the purview of the school committee to enact those procedures, and it is only within the purview to establish the protocol so that the procedures can be interpreted from those policies.
Well, the policy, protocol, and procedure is sometimes used interchangeably, and that's how I see them. I see them as synonymous. However, the previous school committees have had occasion to question certain procedures / protocols because they had budgetary implications. And I'll give you an example. The types of courses that qualify to enable someone to, I guess it's for the lane changes, you need additional credits to change lanes. Several years ago, just about anything anybody took would qualify for that, whether it was through a college, or even related to their, if it was not related to their job description or major. There were also occasions where people were allowed to use PDPs to make a lane change. So that procedure had budgetary implications. So the school committee questioned it and asked for some changes, and those changes 5 years, Mike. So there has to be this sort of, I call it an interface, to make sure that it's like a check and a balance when the protocols are developed. The other thing, protocols typically involve input from the people who are impacted by them, teachers, principals. So it's a process that's involved. And it seems to me that when we went through our policy review, our policies are closely aligned with those recommended by MASC. There are some that we tweak because they're specific to us, but the protocols in different school districts may be different because it's at that local administrative level where they really get decided, hammered out, and implemented. So does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, Mary.
So when we think of school committee, we know that our province has to do with policy, with budget, and with superintendent hiring and dismissal of superintendent. For the most part, those are our three. And so that usually school committee wouldn't be that much involved with protocol. It would be administrative, and a lot of us went to charting the course and all the lines of demarcation. But I think that in the current situation, that we would like to be able to have some input and I think of it more as suggestions to administration in terms of protocol. And so, Kathy, I want to thank you for what you did in setting this out. And I think that a second really good step is for you and Anne Marie to go over this and flesh out, but it wouldn't just be Anne Marie. It would seem as though that Brooke too, in terms of protocol. But it occurs to me that as we look at something, and it's very difficult we're not going to rehash everything that we've been through, but we've all been through a lot, and we've all learned a lot from whatever perspective we brought to it and whatever experience we brought to it. And it seems to me that in addition to professional development, which administration is very open and willing to pursuing, that perhaps some kind of administrative handbook where these protocols would be spelled out so that we would never have a situation where things fell through the cracks, situations where, investigations were not thoroughly handled by a building principal. We can never let that happen again. And so it's incumbent upon us to make suggestions. It'll be, to my way of thinking, it's the administration's decisions as to the final, the protocols and what they decide in terms of protocols and procedures. But I think that we have a right and we have an obligation to offer to help, so that no other school committee, if possible, no other administration would have to undergo what we have undergone, and the pain that has caused in so many areas. So,
no, Mary, you're right on, and I see this the initial go around with Anne Marie and myself as just the beginning. This is, I almost see it as something that spirals through, and it'll come before the school committee, much the same way that we did with policies. But the awareness, I gave Al Fortiani bad information because I didn't see the protocol for overnight field trips, okay? And I looked in the wrong place. It wasn't whatever. But if we know where they are, then they serve as a reference for everybody. And as we are, this is something new that we've uncovered that we need to work on. You're absolutely right about our responsibility and our obligation. And this is not, it'll be something that's ongoing. Like I said, Leah and I had been working on a couple of policies just in the beginning stages to start to look at them and with them, investigations, all that stuff. So we'll continue that, but it's not going to be, it'll be reported to the school committee. We'll have things to look at and to remark on. And in the past, when I've been on the school committee and we've been asked to look at protocol, it was just as you said, that there were suggestions for doing things, and was well received. So yeah, it'll be involved. Brooke.
Just a quick comment, kind of to Mike's question. I really strongly support the concept of, I think, clarifying protocols, because I think that is something that's sorely missing for us right now. And so I'm genuinely excited that this process is beginning. I think it's a necessary process, and I would agree with Kathy. I think not having it all housed in the same place has been detrimental to us. And in some ways, I feel like this is one more thing that we've just uncovered that we're just kind of taking care of. So I'm very, very comfortable with it. I think it's a critical part of all of our work.
Leah?
So, Kathy, I appreciate you trying to absolve me of my duty, but I would like to be part of the conversation.
Oh,
around
absolutely.
policy.
I didn't want to make you feel like, I know what you're doing now, but I'm not trying to absolve you.
No, it's okay. I want to be part of it. So I think that the policies, I actually have a lot of questions on this spreadsheet. So I would love to be
Super.
engaged in that conversation. And none of the questions are super pressing. I think that this kind of reform, these steps toward policy reform and procedural reform are super important.
Yep.
So I know that I talked to you a while back, and I've talked to Brooke about this as well, but I wanted to try to take a quick pause. And if my fellow committee people will indulge me, I have something that I want to say really quickly.
Okay. I'd like to segue to that if it's what you and I talked about.
It is indeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you wait a minute?
Oh, okay.
All right. I just want to see if there's any more questions about this. And I didn't want to exclude you, Leah, but I don't know how you have, even in normal times, 4 kids just boggles my mind, but good for you. Joseph.
Yeah, just very quickly, I actually had a 2-part, very simple question, but I think I can put away the first part. I mean this with the utmost respect to the educators who are on the committee and are in the room with us today. But sometimes there's a different language and a different jargon, a different vernacular that educators use for those, as opposed to those who are not educators. So I just want to make a clarifying point here. So when you talk about protocols, you're actually using that word interchangeably with the term procedures. In other words, we have
yes.
Okay, all right. So when you say protocols,
Might be wrong. It's just me.
No.
It's a Cody thing.
I'm more inclined with statutes and procedures as opposed to policies and protocols. So the second part of the question, again, very simple, is on the additional documents, and this may be the dumb question of the night, but the MOU that we have with the Bolton Police Department, do we have a copy of that?
Yes, we do.
Is it in our policy handbook, or do we have that available for review?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't a stupid question then.
No, I don't think that you have. And I can think of, Kathy, unless.
No, I went looking for that because I wanted to include it. I didn't see it. So if you could send a copy to us, that would be great.
Alita can.
Again, probably in our handbook would be a good place to house certain things. Yeah. Elaine.
Oh, I was just going to say the MOU was definitely online at some point because we had a meeting where we had to review it or re-up it or something. And I remember reading the whole thing because it had been posted online.
Yeah, I did a search for it on the website and it didn't come up with the latest one. It was an old one.
Yeah, well, searching the website is not always an easy task. So I could understand if it didn't come up. I had a couple of I guess opinions on a couple of the wording things on some of these. Do you want that kind of stuff emailed? Because I have a feeling it will go around through the revisions anyway.
If that would be great. If anybody wants questions or comments, everything that's on here in the basis for review was taken directly from the report. There was a whole reference section about the policies that Tim Norris reviewed. So, but that would be great.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Okay, so this will be a project, obviously, and it'll be me, Leah, and Anne Marie, and the 3 of us can decide how we want to approach it. So I'll be in touch if that's okay. Okay, so the other part of this is that in all the work that we have done and the experiences that we have had over the last few months, the school committee as a group has really not discussed the impact that this has had on us the thoughts that have occurred to us. And I think sometimes people think that we talk about stuff. We're very limited in what we can talk about at most of the time, and we always have very full agendas. And so I thought tonight we could check in. We have never talked to Brooke at all, or nor she to us, about her experience. We read the report. A lot of things we couldn't know as we went through all of this. But what I'd like to do is give folks who want to an opportunity to say what's on their mind. And I know that Leah wants to say something, but I'd like to give Brooke an opportunity first, and then Leah, and then anyone else who wants to chime in. So if that's okay with everyone, I will give Brooke the floor.
Sure,
or
thank you.
Steve, or Zoom, or whatever.
So, I crafted, I know that I talked to Leah the other day, and I've kind of gone through my own piece about 300 million times before for drafts before I landed and where I landed tonight. And I've got some bullet points that I'm going to speak to. And trying to keep it short, I found very, very hard, because every time I kind of went through it, it was like 12 or 15 minutes. And then I thought, no, that's way too long, and trying to shorten it up. So in some ways, I feel like it's probably even too short tonight, but certainly I'm open to any, of course, any questions you might have. I think, though, I want to start by just saying, I mean, the whole, for me, everything really started on September 27th. That for me was that very first phone call, that, and that first sucker punch, I think. I don't know if there's another word that I can use that can best describe it. So I just want to go through some thoughts that I've had and just put it out there. And but I won't focus on personnel. Because I still can't. I just can't. So I felt that Tim Norris did a really nice job. I thought that his investigation really accurately portrayed, through the executive summary, the findings and such. I thought, even as I read through, and of course, keep in mind that Anne Marie and I didn't get that report till that night that we were sitting inside of executive session, and we didn't even really get a chance to read it until the Friday that it was posted. So I want to be clear. I know that people have said, well, did they get to see? We absolutely did not see it, really. And even when we did get a chance to see it, there wasn't enough time to read it, because we were in executive session and then they were all collected. So, it wasn't until the Friday when it was made public that really Anne Marie and I got a chance to sit down and read it. But I did think that he portrayed very accurately the events. I think that the situation from my description would be that I think that this has been one of just an incredibly painful journey. I think there's been a universal sense of pain, of anguish, with our communities, with our staff, with our administration, with our students. I think that I would want to point out that I think the Lancaster Police Department did an amazing job with everything. They, of course, were the lead on this. The first phone call I got was through the Bolton chief, but immediately thereafter that call, pretty much, I would say 90% of my work thereafter involved the Lancaster Police Department. And I cannot commend them enough, and Everett Moody, who was the lead, for their process, their sense of instinct on things, their partnership. I think Lieutenant Moody always has been our contact person in Lancaster. And I think that he's just always been resourceful, helpful, compassionate, passionate about the work that he does, thorough, transparent in this particular process with him at the helm. I thought he did a great job. I'm appreciative of all of our police departments. They all played some role in this, and I'm incredibly respectful of the many efforts that they put forward to continuously keep us safe. And I think that they always genuinely have our best interests at heart, particularly in terms of the safety. Our legal counsel was a huge component of all of this. And I know that some of you know that at times I found that incredibly frustrating. But they guided us at every single step. They would often, and I would say almost always, revise any comments I wanted to make or any memos that I wanted to send out were always revised by them. And sometimes I found that frustrating as well, because I felt that there sometimes was a balance there that needed to be toggled between what was legally correct and what was politically correct. And very often those two worlds did not connect well. We were of course bound by contract, and I think that anybody who has any type of thorough knowledge of what of working with unions, working with contract language, etc., will understand that, because there are a series of dates, and we had to go through and literally check off, like every 10 days, whatever it was, we would go through. And I'd also put out that because I know this question came up several times, the school district is far more bound by contract language and cannot put things out there that the police or the courts can put out there. So I want to be really clear on that. There's a definite demarcation of what can be put out there and what can't be by the different groups. I also want to mention our administrative team, because I'm so appreciative of them as we work to build, because we had to build our own case separately from the police case, because of course both organizations have different goals at the end that they are striving to aim towards. So although we shared a lot of information, at the end of the day, they were very, very different investigations. Lieutenant Moody had indicated to me that as a result of our collaborative efforts, he said this case was able to move along very quickly. He also shared that he had never had a more cooperative administration or a more streamlined interaction than they presently do with our school district. And he also indicated that our efforts were instrumental during the investigative process, and knowing the details that I do, I understand that to be a truism. I think the feelings of shock, denial, frustration, betrayal, anger, I think we're all too evident. The pain inflicted by one situation across our communities was difficult to watch. And I think the betrayal was one of the biggest components, because I think that erodes trust, and that was hurtful. I think our students, staff, and communities have had an incredible challenge before them to rise above the situation that was created, and I think it's been a long, and I think it's a profoundly sad journey for all of us to take. I do want to talk about lessons learned for half a minute, because that's how our administrative team works. At the end of our meetings, as I said earlier, we kind of gather our thoughts, and in order to help each other grow, we will talk about things that we've experienced, or say, like, just so, and exactly as Mary said earlier, just so you never have to go through this, we would want you to know that this played out, and this was the best way to deal with it, or this was not a good way to deal with it. And our team is really self-reflective in those kinds of situations. So like I say, we do this every meeting, and very often people come prepared for that. So we take a look at that in this particular situation, and I think there's some lessons learned that we want to talk about too. I think the other thing too, and I've said this before many times, and I remember saying this to the police even as early as that first weekend, that this cannot ever define who we are, because this is not who we are as a school district. And I think that was particularly painful for me to watch as we walked through this, and not being able to put things out there was very, very hard, because it isn't who we are. A couple, I listed 7, so I'm just going to kind of go through them quickly, and I'll just read a little bit from what I've written here. The first one I put out there was that I'm incredibly grateful to the school committee, and I think particularly for the notion of putting forward the independent investigation, because I think at the end of that investigation and the end of the work that Tim Norris did, he was incredibly thorough. Triangulation like I've never experienced before. It was fascinating to watch unfold, and even as a witness, he was tough lawyer to deal with. It was really interesting to work through that process with him. But I think with the independent investigation, from my perspective, having lived through this, I would tell you that it provides truths and it articulates findings that I think we can move forward on to better improve our practices. So I'm very appreciative of the independent investigation. The second thing that I put down there is I think that through this process, again, knowing the details that I know, we reaffirmed that how we as a school district, and I know Todd and I have had this conversation a million times, how we approach technology, including the filters that we use and the controls that we have for safety purposes, continues to serve us incredibly well, as it did with this investigation, because it actually helped to connect dots to the through line for the police investigation. Three, I said, I put down that as seasoned as many of us are in administration, because you're generally pretty seasoned before you hit that administration level. But I think as seasoned as we are in terms of conducting investigations, we can become certainly better calibrated across the district. And I'm very comfortable moving forward with the notion of dedicating part of our summer retreat to formal training process regarding this. And I think that our legal firm will do a great job with it. I've reached out to both Mike McCarroll regarding this and Tim Norris because I think that I think both would do a great job with it. The fourth thing I put down there is we continue to keep good notes on our interviews and ample documentation from the time period from September 27th on. However, I do think that solid notation was lacking during that June to August period, and we need to revisit this as part of our investigation training, is on our notation. Like I said, we had very good notes. We had ample notes. And in fact, when we met with Tim Norris, for example, I know that I came with folders of material and scratch notes and evidence. And so I felt very prepared. And almost all of that had already run through the police as well. So I felt comfortable in taking it forward to Tim. But I do think that it's something that we need to take another look at. The fifth item I've got here actually came as an idea from the Lancaster Police, and I thought it is so fitting. Social media continues to be both a positive and negative in terms of its level of influence within any school district, and ours is no different. And I think that NRSD administration, in working with the Lancaster Police in terms of collectively garnering training that we're all going to attend. And this was, as I say, this was their suggestion. And they said, if we do this, then it calibrates us as a school district and police department in terms of working collaboratively together and all speaking from the same page. So Lancaster and the NRSD administration will work towards this. And then as soon as we have something orchestrated, we of course will invite Stowe and Bolton. The sixth thing that I put down, and Kathy, you actually had alluded to this too, was the current MOU that's in place with the SRO, and both our own legal counsel and Attorney Norris, and we agree, have said that we need to review that. So we'll approach that with the appropriate stakeholders. I've already approached it marginally, but not to the extent to say, okay, now what's this going to look like? But we've approached the fact that the need is there. And finally, and you've alluded to this earlier, Kathy, I think, the start of the work of the collaboration between school committee and administration with regards to policy and protocols, I think is critical. So I'm delighted to see that that's going to happen. And then I think finally, the most important step for us is the process for finding our next principal for NRHS. The New England School Development Council performs multiple executive sessions, searches all year long at both school and central office. So they're great. They're widely known for their broad-ranging networking capacity. They've got their hands in pockets that we just don't. So I think that they're going to do a great job. I look forward to the process that they're going to bring. We've talked already marginally about what that process would look like, and I think it's going to be all-encompassing. So I'm excited to see that start to play out. Then I'm just one or two other final comments. I feel that we can effectively move forward. We've got a lot of work to do ahead of us for sure. I will say that I took umbrage with a parent's comments at the last meeting, indicating that NRHS, and I quote, this was their quote, was a mess. I couldn't disagree more with that. I think NRHS is an outstanding school. I think it's a cut above other high schools. I think the staff and the students work so hard, and I think they produce amazing things in and outside of the classroom. I think our students receive great teaching, mentoring, and coaching. And I think from a staff that's caring, loyal, committed, dedicated, and resilient. I think that they are incredibly resilient. And I could not be prouder of them and our students. So I think it's time for us to move forward. I think we know the direction, we see the pathway, we know things that we need to take care of. We need to get it done. So I think we can move ahead, and I think we're ready for the next steps. So with that, I know it wasn't 15 minutes, but it still was a little bit longer than I wanted to, so I apologize for that.
Well, thank you. Any questions for Brooke? Okay. Leah, would you like to present?
Yeah, so thank you, Brooke. I appreciate that. I put some words down on paper that at this point, they do seem like they're a bit rehashing, but I think it's important for me to nonetheless say everything that I've written because I want this to be in the public record. I also have taken great offense at various things that have been said over the last many months. And I just wanted to kind of put this out there. Some of you guys can disagree with me. I'm not speaking for the committee, although I know that a lot of this struggle has been there for many of us. So if you guys will allow me, it's about a 4-minute read. So I will move as quickly as I can, and certainly would welcome you guys either correcting me or questioning me. That's fine. I think my biggest problem is that with the way that we move, like the snail's pace that public officials have to move, things are said, and then we never have the opportunity to kind of reflect and then respond because 2 weeks has gone by and it seems like yesterday or like yesteryear. So this is what I would say based upon what we've gone through as of late. I wrote, when I decided to volunteer my time to this committee, I had no idea that this would be part of the job. None of us sitting here wanted any of this on our plate. That said, I'm still really motivated to be here and volunteer because I'm really invested in my kids' schools and their success. So as far as my role will allow as policy subcommittee person or school committee member, I want to assist in the repair efforts. But before we begin with this important work, I do want to clarify my understanding of the recent events and respond to some of the citizens' comments at our last meeting and prior, and finish by just kind of throwing out one challenge to the administration, the superintendent in particular. So last fall, when our community was confronted with the unthinkable, it was hard to even fathom how this could happen at Neshoba. It's brought much into question. We're shocked, sad, angry, really angry. These feelings naturally lead all of us to blame, which personally I reserve for the now convicted offender. So she's the one who did this really terrible thing. And when her actions came to light in September of 2019, she was removed from her position and the police took over. So the problem is that soon thereafter, allegations surfaced that our high school principal was actually wearing June. And it was really hard to believe. But after hearing from our community members at various meetings, we settled on an independent law firm to investigate who knew what and when. So this report unfortunately took more than 4 months, but I think it was a necessary time period. And then in March of 2020, we were granted access to the executive summary. And we learned first that Mr. DiDomenico did indeed know about these allegations in June. They were brought to his attention. And by his own admission, he didn't complete a thorough investigation. And when the district HR director asked him for his conclusions, he reported it was a dead end and distinct misconduct. So the report concluded, however, that he, quote, inadvertently shielded himself from knowledge of serious teacher misconduct by failing to conduct and document a competent investigation. So this is a failure of leadership on his part. We know that now. There's no malice in his failure, but that does nothing to negate the effect. He's resigned now, and the terms of that departure are shaped and remain shielded by personnel law. So that's that. But second, more importantly for us here, is that the report concluded through the admission of several people that Mr. DiDomenico, including Mr. DiDomenico, that the superintendent was not made aware of these alleged crimes until almost October. So logic dictates that we accept this information as fact. I don't think we have any other choice. To posit other unsubstantiated lines of reasoning is speculative at best, and frankly, at worst, driven by ulterior motive. In the absence of any evidence of the superintendent engaged in misconduct, it's logical that she stays at her post, because relieving a superintendent 8 months into a contract is folly for any district, but especially for this one at this time. So to be clear, I have engaged, and I don't think anybody has engaged in any cover-up or misdeed. And we never have any intent to stifle public discourse as we sit in this Zoom session that nobody else is a part of except for us. That's not to stifle public discourse, but we're battling through an unprecedented health crisis. So it's just the way it has to be right now, and maybe not in the future. But as a matter of fact, this particular school committee has made significant strides toward improving our accessibility through listening sessions, many phone conversations, emails, and the like. And I know that I'll continue to do so, and I'm sure everyone else will too. So I welcome future conversations with my constituents in Stowe about any and all of this. So keep the phone calls and emails coming. So what now? I think that we have a lot to celebrate. There's countless things that we should be proud of in this district. I refuse to believe that one malicious actor can break any of this. So what I think is really important right now is that we all pull together, we talk to one another, we push past any divisive politics. And I think that our kids are watching us, and the language that we use, the attitudes we project here, at school, at the dinner table, and I think most importantly on social media, is going to undoubtedly shape the result of any improvement effort we engage in from this moment on. So here's my challenge to our superintendent. In citizens' comments and throughout various communication platforms over this time, some constituents have asserted that despite you having no real-time knowledge of these events, you're somehow still responsible for what has transpired. I'll go on the record as saying that personally, as someone who understands the complex nature of operating a high school, I'm struggling to agree with that assertion. I know the principal to be the primary driver of high school climate and culture, not a superintendent. But that said, the thought still lingers. So what I want to see moving forward as a representative of so many people who have this similar question is, how will the administration, how will you, Superintendent Clenchey, rethink and reform systems, procedures, and restore trust damaged by one teacher's action and one principal's inaction? And that is all I had to say.
Well, you said a mouthful, very thoughtful, and I really appreciate the time that you took to organize your thoughts. And I would agree that this committee has been very accessible in terms of listening to people and responding, and in some cases to some difficult statements. But we'll continue to do the best that we can. Brooke, I don't know if you're prepared right now to
I think
address.
Sure. I think in part, but I'm not sure, Leah, whether I'm going to hit on it or not. But I think that's one of the reasons why I look at these 7 items and say this has to be our starting point, right? And then, you know, your high school principal, your thinking is spot on. You know, when you're hiring a principal, that's critical, like that. And especially your high school, and it's not minimalizing any schools, but your high school is always the flagship school of any school district. That's where all of the younger kids can't wait to get to, right? That's the beacon on the hill. And so it's critical. Got so many things that are ripe, that are going well. We need this last piece in there to fit in there to make the rest of it work. You know, so I think in part this is going to have to go back to the community to say, okay, community, through this process, I think with NESDEC, what's critical to you? What's most important to you? And I think it gets back to what do we value as a school community. You know, I mean, I'll just speak off the cuff, but I mean, I know how much I value social emotional learning. I value somebody who's an academic, but somebody who really understands children. I value somebody who understands the importance of relationship building, and somebody who can have credibility, instant credibility, and who can glean more credibility with time and through their actions. So I think that piece is critical, but I think within that fall these other 7 items, you know. Are they prepared? Do they have the right knowledge for the you know, the investigation is just one of those pieces, but it's certainly a huge piece. And you know, there has to be, I think when you become a leader, you almost have to become fearless in some ways. You can't ever be afraid to ask the hard questions. And sometimes, you know, you wonder when you're looking at investigations, these are tough questions to ask. And even when you think this probably can't possibly happen, you can't let that shutter you from going forward with the questions that you need to be asking, which I suspect it is a piece of what happened here. It's not the only thing, but it's a piece. So I think we need these 7 items to be working, and then finally that piece of getting the right person, that right fit. I said this last time, and I'm going to say it again this time. If we don't have that right fit, we need to go back out and look again. And I think that's one of the gifts of time. I think that by doing it how we're doing it, if we start this process in September and October and the right pool doesn't come to us, we need to go back out and look again until we find that fit.
I think that in terms of your challenge, Leah, it's an ongoing question to ask in all that we do. There are some things that we put in place and then we see how it works. So I don't want to lose sight of the question. I think it's an important question, and it's important for us to revisit it and take a measure of it. So this will be, yes, Brooke.
One final thought. I think we are all up to the challenge. I would want to put that forward. I think we accept that challenge and we're up to that challenge.
I agree. And I just think that some things, like, it's almost like what I always think about is what they say about professional development. You have a professional development day, you go to the workshop, and then what happens next? You write a curriculum, it goes somewhere, when does it get pulled down? There has to be this ongoing assessment of, and it's very, in my mind, it's like, you know, design or systems thinking or design thinking. There's a problem, you analyze it, you propose solutions, you revisit the solution for effectiveness. So there's a cycle to it. And I don't want to lose sight of what Leah has presented, and just want to say that this is an ongoing conversation that we will revisit and have different metrics for seeing how we're doing. Leah.
Kathy, just as a matter of timetable, so the policy subcommittee will meet, you know, soon, I imagine, and we can converse about the policy piece. But then there are other elements that we were looking at to try to address concerns that have been brought up throughout this thing.
Yes.
In particular, student voice and
Yes.
you know, our meeting with the student government leaders.
Yes.
So, you know, what can we provide to the community to say, you know, here is our plan.
Yes.
For kind of restoring trust. Here is what we hope to accomplish. Like, what might be our timetable for giving that?
I think we can make it. And I think, like you said, the policy subcommittee, so we need to establish that. But it's not, how can I say it? It's not just an event. It's not just one thing. We have a lot of things we want to do, and I think they'll make a difference. But it's in everything that we do. because the goal is to, in my mind, is to build that, I call it emotional capital, which can equate to an increase in trust. And if you build that, and there is, and mistakes are made or something goes wrong, and you have the analysis of it and you own it, then you've got that foundational trust to build on and move forward. So I think that I don't want to lose sight of your point about building trust. And I think that if the policy subcommittee can meet and create a calendar, whatever we need to do, then we can present it. But as we all know, actions speak louder than words. It's sad because we had some things in the works there before everything shut down. I know that you were going to interface with Steve and Kimberly about the student council, and Mary and you and I had talked about the student member of the school committee. So there's still stuff that we can be doing. We just have to figure out when, and I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Okay, Brooke, and then I want other folks to have an opportunity to chime in.
I'll defer.
Okay, all right, other folks, opportunity to chime in. Mary, I saw your hand.
So I want to echo something that Leah said, how open I believe all of us on school committee are to our constituents, to listening, to responding, and I see the diligence with which, you know, people strive to respond. This isn't my first time on school committee. Now I realize that 1987 was a long time ago, but I served from 87 to 90. And on 3 different school committees. So I've said it before, I count that as 9 years of experience. And the world has changed in the last 33 years. But something that I've experienced, which, and I just want to talk about, is what some of our constituents have written and some actions that they've taken that are extremely hurtful. And these particular people do not represent most of our parents. I know that. But it is very disconcerting. And when I think back to the fall, something I call public shaming, a sign, at least one, was put up, not on someone's lawn, but on 117 westbound, where people could see it. It reminded me of the early days of New England, public shaming on the public square. And it, you know, whereas someone could put something on his or her lawn, it's illegal to do something like that. So that's one of the, that's something that I would like to say. But not only that, emails that were sent to the whole committee questioning us on why we ran for school committee, what our credentials were, our intelligence. It really pretty much as bad as you can imagine. Very, very hurtful. And again, I want to say this is not the majority of people, but as each of us is a civil servant, you know, we raise our right hand and we take an oath of office. And the reason we do that as school committee is because of the students. I have 6 grandchildren. You know, my children went to school in Emerson School and Florence Sawyer and the high school. And to be questioned in such a hurtful way, I would say to people, I would echo what Leah said, you know, your children are watching you and they're listening to you, and you can do better than this. I saw too something that I would almost call a mob mentality of people just so angry. And I guess, and even now, we have more reason to be angry in this pandemic. You know, whose fault is it? And look at our lives. And so there's been even more anger. But I don't think most people realize what our school committee has endured. And when, you know, it's ironic to me with the thousands or no, the hundreds of people who were the concerned citizens and were signing this and that, and we had to do this and that, not respecting our judgment, the consideration that each of us has given to all the events that happened, but just, demanding certain things. And then when it came time to running for office, where are those people? They're no place to be seen. So I would say to our constituents, who are very literate, for the most part, as I meet people, compassionate, caring so much about your children's education, live up to that and realize that we are acting with our best judgment. We're not getting paid, and what we're getting repaid by a small percentage of people is very, very hurtful. And I would say to those people, look at your lives. There are things like therapy. There's prayer. Do something else rather than attacking school committee. And that being said, I would say we are very open to honest opinions, to anything that people want to say to us in terms of policies, in terms of the schools. We are here for you, but we're not here to be abused.
Thank you, Mary. Other comments? Mike, and then Elaine.
I don't know that I could say what I want to say any better than what's been said. I want to thank Leah for taking the initiative and kind of sparking this conversation, and I want to thank Superintendent Clenchey for being as reflective as she was. We've said a lot tonight because my ears have perked up every time it's been said. We've talked a lot about lessons learned, and I as I reflect over the past few months, I want to think about what this experience is distilled down to. And a few people have mentioned this in the past half hour or so, and that there is this, for whatever reason, we can argue whether these are justified reasons or not, but there seems to be a level of a trust deficit. And I think that's a very real consequence of what has happened. And I think from my lens, I don't think it's instructive to debate whether that trust is lost, whether the lost trust is justified or not. But I think instead, I would say what Mary said. I would invite my constituents, I can speak only on my behalf, to continue to reach out and be a part of this process that helps to restore that trust, whether it's trust between the community and the school committee, trust between the community and members of the school committee or members of the administration. I think that there's probably nobody at this meeting that would reject any kind of constructive discourse. I think where we run into trouble is when it becomes deconstructive discourse. And it's very difficult to respond to that. It's very difficult to cull anything that is productive out of that. I think even if we disagree, as long as that dialogue is constructive, respectful, and based in intelligence, I think any of us would be willing to engage. I mean, there's a ton that I've reflected on, but I think if I distilled everything down to this one thing, I think it would be this next push to restore trust.
Thanks, Mike. Elaine.
Thank you. Actually, I was going to say something about trust as well, but I'm going to try to focus my comments in a different vein so as not to be repetitive. But because we do talk a lot about trust and wanting to have an open and trusting environment for our community and for our kids to learn in. But the thing that I've been struggling with throughout this whole, that it is precisely that people trusted other people at certain points throughout this process that got us into trouble. If multiple people, I can think of 3 or 4 just reading the investigation, had been mistrustful and had not trusted and had questioned everything, then this person might have been caught a lot earlier. And how to reconcile those two things has been something that I've really been grappling with personally. Serendipitously, I read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers, recently, which is a fascinating read in the context of a scandal like this. And it actually helped me put a lot of this into perspective about how, one, as human beings, just our human psychology, we are very bad at telling people that are lying to us or trying to deceive us. And two, as human beings, we have a natural inclination to trust other people, to think they're telling us the truth. And that's actually a good thing, because if we don't, things go very dark and very bad really fast. And if we want to maintain this open, caring, safe environment for our students, then we're going to have to trust each other, not just the staff, not just the students within their own groups, but everybody's going to have to trust each other. So I started to distill some of this out into what are some lessons learned that we could use moving forward. And the first one is really, I think we need to challenge every assumption that we make in these types of situations. So I've heard from multiple educators from multiple districts that, investigations are learned from somebody else. Somebody teaches you, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a colleague, and that's just always the way it's been done. Like, well, maybe we need to challenge that assumption that that's the way it's always been done and do some things differently. So I think there's a host of assumptions that we all really need to examine carefully and challenge every single one of them to say, is there a better way? But the other thing I think is to take these types of decisions and processes sort of out of the hands of a single individual, so that their trust, their judgment never has to be called into question, because everyone is going to make mistakes at certain points. And we're never going to be able to use one individual's judgment on every situation, because every situation is different and every individual is different. And it just leaves so much up to chance that I could see this happening over and over again. So a couple of suggestions that I just sort of brainstormed myself would be, investigations shouldn't be done by an individual. I think we need something like a committee that has a diverse base of perspectives, a counselor in there that is using the lens of student trauma or student needs. You obviously have an administrator, you probably need a lawyer in there, but like some sort of broad group like that works together. Maybe you even have a team A and a team B, where team A does the investigation, team B reviews the investigation, and then, maybe the next time it swaps, things like that. I think we need some sort of an anonymous tip reporting hotline or some version of that, where people, for the time being, if they don't feel comfortable speaking up, can do so in some sort of anonymous way, probably again to a counselor or to a nurse, or somebody who's been specifically trained in this type of thing. And then the last thing that I wanted to say is that I think that we need some sort of, and this was mentioned earlier, some sort of regular feedback that we can get from the broad community. We tend, I think, in this district to rely a lot on representative type of feedback and involvement. So obviously the school committee is a major example of that, but we talk about our school councils or a representative on the school calendar committee, or just different 1 or 2 person representatives that is supposed to take the feedback from their entire community, filter it down to one viewpoint, and then offer that to the staff or to the administration. And I think that we could use more avenues like these quick surveys that we have done a few times now that have been fairly well received. 1 or 2 questions, quick questions, or something like that, where we can take a quick pulse of a broad community to be able to see the nuances and subtleties across a much broader portion of the population, that will be able to catch some of these more nuanced issues that might get lost when we play this sort of game of telephone of like, I talk to 5 different constituents, I filter their feedback, then I pass that along. And by the time it gets to where it really needs to go, some information's been lost. So those were just some of the suggestions that I had.
Thank you. Seeing none, I like to have the last word every once in a while. I know I usually give it to Leah, but tonight I might take it. As I'm sitting and listening, I'm filled with gratitude that I get to work with you folks. This is the first school committee I've been on, but I've had experience with lots of school committees in a lot of districts as a teacher, as a principal, as a central office administrator. And I have to say that in my mind, this group is exceptional in the thoughtful discourse. I know I use that a lot, but we see that for any meeting, we have a list of things that we have to address. And it would be so much easier in a way. We just tick them off, vote, discuss, blah, blah, blah. But I appreciate the fact that we really go deep on things and we think so thoughtfully about them and from a variety of lenses. And that we want to acknowledge the feelings that people have, but we want to assert what we're about as a committee and what our commitment is to the children of this district. And I think we do that with all the work that we do. And I think that the word, if we were doing a Wordle, the biggest word in the middle would be trust. Building trust, restoring trust, knowing when maybe you shouldn't trust so much. And it's complex. It's not an easy thing. But I think all the things we've talked about tonight, all the little pieces that were related to what we've been through, but also now related to what we're going through, those things build the foundation of trust. And we still have work to do. And I'm glad that we have the leadership that we have to address it. But I'm very appreciative of this committee. And I think I said it in a response to a parent. I was at a loss, and Mike very eloquently responded on behalf of the committee. And I said that I'm fortunate to have a committee who can bridge my gaps in leadership when I don't have the words or the thinking, that this group is such an excellent team for putting all the pieces together for so many things. So I just want to say thank you. And we leave a meeting, we do work, we leave with more stuff to do, and we will do it and we will be better for it. And we're not going to lose sight of what our commitment is to kids and to the communities. And we are open to listen, but in a respectful and affirming way. We're not going to dodge issues, but we're not going to allow ourselves to be abused. So I know I said I'd have the last word. Does anybody else want the last word before we move on to the Leah, you sure? Okay. All right. The next thing on the agenda is the chair updates. I don't have a lot. We need to, I think, go into executive session, not tonight, but to pick a date to get an update on negotiations. So we need to have a 48 hour, where's Lita? Hi, Lita. We have to have 48 hours to post. What about Monday for folks? Is Monday doable for folks, or Tuesday? I know you all have a lot of plans. Anybody want to check your calendar, see what's going on? What would be a good time to do it? Do you want to do
How about 6 in the morning?
6 in the morning? Hey, I'm at my best. I gotta say it.
That's when I get up.
How about 6 at night? Can everybody do 6 on Monday? And I think we have, Brett, unfortunately, I think you have to recuse yourself from discussions about negotiation. But I don't think we can allow you in. Sorry. He's broken up. I don't think he'll ever get over it. Alita, if you could send us out the information. Also, there are specific guidelines that we have to adhere to because we'll be doing an executive session in a virtual format. So, Alita, if you could send us those guidelines with the posting, so we'll have it'll be scheduled as a regular meeting. We'll go from the regular meeting into executive session and adjourn from there. And Brooke, you thought maybe what, 15 minutes?
Yes, I don't think it'll take long, unless my partner.
And how long have you been working with this group?
See things differently.
Oh, I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
Would
Okay.
15 or 20 minutes do it to the negotiation subcommittee? Do you see us taking much longer than that? No. Okay, they're all saying no. So I think
There haven't been any truly formal negotiations yet, so,
Don't ruin the meeting for us, Steve. We're going to go into executive session and talk about it.
okay.
Okay, thanks. All right. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about, and actually, I think that it's been Leah and Elaine touched on it. I just jotted down when we were talking about the online learning and what was going on with families, just this idea of a quick survey. How's it going? What do you need? What can we be doing differently? So just something to think about. I think to reach out, I think parents are very appreciative of, I know they're very appreciative of the survey that we did earlier relative to the school calendar and early release days. And then the one about the April vacation. So if you guys could talk about it and see what makes sense and get back to us, that would be great. And then that's all I have. Brooke, Superintendent Sutton.
so. I've actually touched on a couple of quick things, and I'm going to be quick here tonight too, because we've already talked about the graduating class, and you know that Mr. Cullinane is doing things on that front. Transportation contract, just so you know, that's an ongoing saga for us. So nothing to report out tonight, but we anticipate that there may be something for the next meeting. Would that be fair to say, Pat? Oh, Pat's not there at this moment.
Oh, there she is.
There she is. Yeah.
Pat, unmute.
You have to unmute Pat. There you go. Say it again. Try again.
Unmute.
I did. I unmuted.
Good, yeah. So I'm just saying, Pat, that we may have something for them for next school committee meeting.
Yes.
Transportation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Budget, I've already touched base on most of what was said. The only thing that I did put a final note here. I mean, the E&D, we are asking if there's any possibility to utilize E&D funds a little bit differently. DESE has suggested, and not us alone. I mean, regional school districts have asked the DESE. They've got the question into the DOR, but there's nothing to report back on that right now. And I just put, I said, I think that so much of what we're experiencing is presenting new issues for folks at the DESE, the DOR, the Department of Labor, all of it. I mean, this is just so big with so many different layers. There's a lot of work out there to be done on this. Food services, just a quick update. As of today, 384 meals went home to our district children. That means that there's about 100 kids that took home those meals. So just to kind of put that in the back of your noggin there to think about that. So, and I want to give a huge shout out to Tom Poole, to our managers, to everybody that continues to come in and support our 3 sites because we have a site in each community, and I think that they've just done a wonderful job, and I'm so grateful to our food services folks. I put a little note again, please remember that if your financial situation changes at all, you can stop by and pick up a meal or a group of meals for your children. The final note, nothing of note really to report from MSBA. I know that you saw a note that they've put out there. I've been very busy with MSBA, surprisingly, in the last week and a half. So I continue to, even though I know that their offices are closed, I continue to communicate via phone and email with our representative, probably about every other day right now. So just asking for things that I continue to supply and whatnot. So I know that the notice is out there, but I would want you to know that the truth is, even though they're closed, I'm dealing with them quite frequently right now. I think the only other thing I want to put out here, I didn't write this down, but in light of us talking tonight, I think sometimes what gets lost, and I know Kathy and I've had this conversation in the last, probably several months, not even just several weeks, is those people who send the positive notes. I can't thank those parents enough. What you see is always the negative. But I would tell you, for the last several months, I have received positive emails from parents. And I am so grateful for that. And even during this pandemic, people that are dropping me 1 or 2 lines saying, just thinking about you, or want to thank you for this, or we cannot lose sight of the positive people that are in our communities. And I think that's so important. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank those parents that take the time to think, I'm going to drop her a quick line or two. And I always write how much I'm appreciative of that. So keep those positive things coming to folks. Thank you so much. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Leah.
Question.
Okay, so just very quickly, for number 4, food services, I just wanted to clarify that our policy is basically that the food is being prepared for families in need, but that need is very difficult to demonstrate at this point. And so anybody can basically receive this food assistance, but it really should be for families who are in financial need.
Exactly. And you're exactly correct. And thank you for bringing that up, because you're absolutely right. Right now, it's pretty tough to go through any real process right now. I don't think that there's anybody out there that's taking advantage of our situation. Right now, we're still seeing our kids that we know are our kids that are already qualified. We're not seeing, even though it's open right now, you're absolutely right. We are not seeing that component taking advantage of the possibility that they can come and get meals. That's just not happening yet. It might still, but not right now.
Leah.
So, and then on number 5, back in the day, we had started a committee around the MSB kind of education. And so we could definitely talk via email, but I just wanted to throw that out there that we should perhaps start reconvening.
Yes, I would agree with you. And I think we have, part of our challenge is going to be, what does this look like now, right? Interestingly enough, I think I shared this with Kathy, but I don't know if I shared it with a group. Our students who are working on the, I guess, public service announcement, for lack of another more eloquent term, actually have continued that work. And their teacher sent me the trailer for it. Just so precious, as the students are saying, this is why we need a new building. This is why we need some help with this. And they've done a fabulous job. Not quite ready for prime time, but pretty close. So thanks to our students for continuing, and their teaching staff who are guiding them through this. Really appreciate the fact that they're still doing this during the pandemic.
Brooke, why don't you share the trailer, send it out? I was so impressed with it. It is so, it's professional. It is exceptional. And if this is just a preview, I can't wait to see the whole thing. So I think the committee would love to see it.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Joseph.
Yeah, very quickly, Madam Chairman, I want to just add a quick question of the superintendent, just preface it by a comment. And I did take a moment to read through the MSBA's notification that they put out today. And at the risk of sounding cavalier, I wanted my time back. It sounded to me, and when I read that it's basically they're putting the burden back on the districts to deal with whatever we have to deal with. So in that in mind, the question I had for you, and I apologize, Madam Superintendent, because it's probably something I could probably figure out on my own, but because I only read that late this afternoon, I'm going to throw it in your court. From what little I know about school building projects, it always struck me that the most important thing that any district had to keep in mind were the deadlines and the timeframes that you have to maintain to keep eligible for funding through the MSBA. So I'm just curious if perchance, and I think it's probably 50-50 at this point, that the 3 sending communities cannot stage their town meetings at the end of June, and it is pushed till September. Mm-hmm. How did it impact or our process for eligibility?
So that's a great question. And I've had this preliminary discussion already with our representatives. So great minds think alike. I had asked too, and I think I may have shared this with you at our last meeting. Perhaps I didn't, but I have asked as well, and I think other school districts are thinking the same thing. Can we alter that at the start of that eligibility period? And I've said the same thing because I know that our town administrators are we're all hoping for a June 22nd meeting, because quite frankly, not a one of us, well, I shouldn't speak for the town administrators. I know I don't want to go to a 1/12 budget, right? So, I mean, I'm probably as hopeful as anyone that June 22nd meeting is going to happen. But with that said, the reality is I don't know if it really can. And so I asked MSBA if we could be considered to start our eligibility period later in light of that very thing. And I got the sense that right now that they're looking at being, I didn't get a yes or no. We're looking at this and being flexible in terms of the situations that we're all finding ourselves in. And I know that I'm not the only school district that has asked that question of MSBA. So I suspect that they're probably reflecting on that right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready for a motion on the consent agenda? Elaine?
Yes. I move to approve the consent agenda of April 22nd, 2020, containing the warrants of April 24th, 2020, and the meeting minutes of April 8th, April 14th, and April 16th, 2020.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Joseph? Leah? You get to vote first.
Yes.
Kathy, yes. Joseph?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Mary? Mary? Yeah.
You have to
Yes.
unmute there.
Yeah. Steve? Unmute. Steve?
Steve, you have to unmute. There we go. That's it.
Yeah.
Yes. Elaine?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have a meeting scheduled for May 6th. I don't know what we have as agenda items. We may have something to report relative to the work around policies and procedures. Anything else? Whatever update Brooke has for us. Is there anything else? I'm hoping that we can have some information about plans for the seniors. That would be awesome to know.
I think we will.
What we can do. If you think of anything, send them to me and I'll work with Brooke to get it done. Anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Steve, second?
Second.
Leah? Okay, vote Leah.
Yes.
Kathy, yes. Joseph?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Elaine?
Yes.
And Mike?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate all your time. Be well.
Bye,
Thank you.
guys.
And we'll see you next time, okay? Good night.
Night.